welcome to The Long Road. I'm your host, Chris Roberts, and we're going to talk about a few little things today. The first one we're going to talk about is the Keene School District. Last Monday, the Keene School Board met to come up with a plan to decide which option that we were going to pick, if any, to for the elementary schools. And we went through it last Monday night. It was kind of rushed. Unfortunately, there was no television of it, and which was kind of sad because picking a school, picking her option, and possibly spending $12–14 million, asking the public for $10–12–14 million or even more, should be open to the public. The people should be able to understand. And I think there was maybe 5 or 6 people from the public there. Basically, it was us school board members just talking among ourselves, and the majority of the people there on the board, I think, already had their mind made up going into it. And to me, I think that's always a bad way to do anything. I think we need to sit down, we need to bring in new information and to decide what we should do. And but unfortunately, a lot of times in politics, and whether you like it or not, the school board it's political, and we don't always represent everybody. We all have our little groups that we want to represent. And that's what happened. And so you have some people that want to keep every school open. They want a neighborhood school everywhere. And basically, we had one school board member says, we got to do what's best for us. And I found that really disheartening. Best for us, like I stated to them, no, it isn't what's best for us. It's one, it's what's best for the students, and second, what's best for the people of Keene, and what's best for the school board members should be the last consideration that anybody should be using to make a decision. I provided the school board information that I gave on the show last week, and I was told that those numbers, you know what, you couldn't trust numbers like that. And I said, well, the numbers came from the Centers for Disease Control, came from the United States Census, and it came from the state of New Hampshire. And again, I was told that they felt it was more important to trust Dick Cates' numbers because Dick Cates' numbers will be right. And, well, that's an awful lot of money, awful lot of money to put in the trust of one individual. And that one individual cost the taxpayers of Keene about $7 or $8 million because he was one of the driving force of getting the jail out of out of Westmoreland. The jail in Westmoreland had been approved by the county delegation, and it was going to cost $23 to $24 million. And then from some local pressure by that individual and some of his neighbors, they were able to convince 1 or 2 people to change their vote. And so that person changed their vote, and then a couple of years later, there was no jail in Westmoreland. Well, there is the old building in Westmoreland sitting there. We Keene taxpayers are paying over 27% of the cost of that empty building just sitting there, rotting away, deteriorating. Chances are we're going to have to pay to demolish it. The second part is that instead of having $24 million, we spent pretty close to $38 million for the jail on 101. And me, I like to put my trust in the numbers. You go through multiple sources, you come up with numbers that you can feel comfortable with, and then you trust the numbers. The numbers don't have any emotion. And so if you go 5, 6, 7, 8 different places and the numbers always they're seeming more and more to be right, and you ask the questions and they seem to be right, that's where you put your trust in, because numbers don't have personal interest, personal bias. People use numbers to support or disprove their personal bias. people can distort numbers, but numbers by themselves are pretty honest. And before I go into some of the numbers that we were talking about and to show and say, hey, I feel really comfortable in my numbers, I'd be able to stand by my numbers. Because in 2000, when I came on the school board in 2001, the prior year, the voters of Keene had passed the bond to upgrade the new high school. And I was told that the bond was to be able to increase the capacity of the high school to 1,800 students. And as a new board member, I was going through a lot of information. I was reading quite a bit. And then I came upon long-range projection chart. And in that long-range projection chart, it said by 2015, we should have less than 1,300 students in the high school. And I go and I asked a few people, I'm saying is, why did we go tell the people that we needed money, I think it was like $19 or $20 million to increase the school size to 1,800 seat capacity? I said, it doesn't make sense. You know that we're going to be 500 students less within the next 10 years. And I was told that's the only way that we could get the voters to pass the bond. And I go, what? So, yep, we went out, we decided, and what we were going to do is, what numbers can we tell the voters of Keene to get them to pass the bond? They had failed, the bond had failed the first time around, and so what we're going to do is we're going to give the people the numbers that they want to hear to pass the bond. And matter of fact, one of the board members at the last Monday's meeting says it's no big deal if it fails this time around because the voters will always pass it the second time around. And I don't think you, the voters, are that dumb or that ignorant. I think now you want answers, and you've been fooled a couple of times, and now you no longer want to be fooled. And you know what? I am going to try to lay out as much information as possible for you to make a well-informed decision. I'm not going to make your decision for you. You elected me to represent you. I will go through the numbers. I'll go through the projections. I'll go up from multiple sources. And then I will decide, based on a lot of input, what is going to be best for the students, the quality of education, and what can the citizens of Keene afford. And I want to make sure it's not my name on any white elephant. I want to make sure we don't put white elephants. And so before I get into some of the other numbers about the Keene School District, I'm going to show you how we, and I go we, because that's the thing in the Marine Corps. You can't go and say, that guy messed up because you're all Marines. You can't go say someone in your company messed up because you're part of that company, you're part of that battalion. So it's always a we. So if someone in your unit messes up, the whole unit messes up. So if someone at the Concord or the school board or the city council does something that I don't agree with, or a vote that that I don't agree with, at the end, it's a we, and I'm not going to go and say, I don't like Representative XX or Councilman Y or school member Z because they voted one way or another, a way that I didn't understand or I didn't like. No, it's we. When you have an elected body, we are a collective. So if the body does something wrong, you can't go and say, well, I'm not part of the body right now. I'm going to stand out aside and say, I didn't do that. You will always hear me say we. Whether I like it or not, I'm part of that body. I'm part of that body's decision. And so that's why, like I said, you always hear me do we. I'm going to show you how we do our budgeting, especially in government, and especially on the school board and up at the state level, that people just don't pay attention to. Quite different than the way I had to do it in the Marine Corps. In the Marine Corps, I always had to work with 3 budgets. At one time, I had to use last year's budget because we still had things on order, and it sometimes takes about a year and a half to close out that budget as things that you ordered are coming in, prices have changed back and forth. You got the current budget, and then you got the budget going forward. And every time you make a change in one of those budgets, it had a change on the other 2 budgets. It was a chain reaction. And so what I took was a copy out of the book, the budget guideline book from the school board. And it had labor contracts development. 7 collective body groups in the Keene School District have approved contracts for 2013-2014 fiscal years. Salary and benefit levels reflect those contracts. So in 2012-2013, basically over here, is we had contracts, just salaries of $28.9 million. Healthcare costs is 6.7, retirement of 2.8, FICA 2.1. So basically, I took out some of these smaller ones, but basically the negotiated labor contracts for 12-13 was $41.2 million. So basically 41.2, say, basically out of $60 million. Okay, but the contract that the budget that the people approved, the salaries were $28.5 million. So we can go and say, okay, salaries went down $400,000. Okay, that's because we cut $1.5 million worth of positions, but we also added 300,000 in new positions, and so that's part of. So you would think the salaries would go down, but what happens is because of for example, the teacher's contract, the custodian contract, the CAPS contract, all these 7 contracts. That number, all those contracts, that second year increase or whatever, that was all added into this. So basically, 1.2. So you go here, $1.2 million. So, and then 4. So basically, $800,000 in increases. That's what year to year. And so, and that's what you're looking right here. But if I was doing my, the way I did it in the military, and I would have to put 800,000 on this one, 800,000 on this one, 800,000 on this one. And these 800,000 is if there is no more in salary increases. But you got step increases and you got other contracts and stuff. So what happens is, so you see 43.1, so that's a $1.8 million increase from year to year just as a result of negotiated labor contracts. Okay, so I take out retirement because retirement stays the same for every 2 years. So I put 3.5, 3.5. So 14, 15, if we don't lay off anybody, then the negotiated labor contract goes up to 44.5. 15, 16, healthcare about 300,000. You can expect maybe about half a $1,000,000 in 15, 16 because it goes up every 2 years. Then all of a sudden, labor contracts 46 and 47.5. So right now, if we go in, so if you do not go in and increase anything, no utility costs, no repairs, excuse me, you don't increase anything over what it was in the 13-14 budget except for labor, and you don't lay off anybody, okay, in the 16-17, the 3rd year out contract from now, I mean budget, that budget would be $66.5 million, minimum of $66.5 million without changing one thing, without adding one position, without adding one pencil, an extra piece of paper, without repairing anything. So basically, just as a result of labor and the other costs with labor, there's the difference. It's $3.5 million. Basically, you're looking about $1.5 million on average each year. The budget will be going up just as a result of the labor costs. And so when you sit down and approve a contract, you're always told the first year. Okay, you're never told about what the salaries are going to. It's never broken out like this and saying, okay, this is what happens when the salaries go. This is what happens when health care goes. This is a retirement. This is FICA and dental, life, long-term disability, workman's comp. Okay, because if you did it like we did in the Marine Corps, if we go in and make these decisions, and I know it's going to be $66.5 million in 3 years from now, I have to make some hard decisions right now. How do I go in and reduce that number? And it was kind of like I was talking about last week. Do we reduce a principal? We were talking about going from 5 schools down to 4 schools or possibly to 3. Well, now we're going to go down to 4 schools plus a preschool. So we're still having all 5 buildings being operated on. So that's the way we should be looking at that. When we present it to the public, we should have a 5-year projection thing so that people can know what's going on and how a decision is made. But instead, we like to make these decisions in the vacuum. And we don't worry about next year or the year after because some of us are not going to be on a school board. Some of us are going to be retired. Some of us just want to be able to go, what can we do to make this as easy as possible? This is too much of a hassle. Or some will say, I don't make enough money to put all this time and effort. Well, quote unquote, we may not make enough money to put all this time and effort, but you, the taxpayers, are spending an awful lot of money, and you're giving us an awful lot of money to educate your children, and you should be expecting much more in return. Like I said, I was told by a board member that they would much rather trust Dick Cates' numbers over the numbers that I was providing. And what I've got is there was a well thought out research project that was done. It was called Community Well-Being in the Monadnock Region. It was some of the people that were on it was John McLean, the city manager. It was funded by the New Hampshire Charitable Trust. It was funded by Jim Putnam, and it was funded by a number of other people. And this assessment of determinants of social well-being and community needs in Monadnock Region, New Hampshire, was conducted by the New Hampshire Center for Public Policy Studies at the request of Monadnock United Way, the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, Monadnock Region, and was underwritten by those organizations. This work, like all the Center Public Work, is in the public domain and may be reproduced without permission with appropriate citations. And what we were talking about is, okay, we want to, like I said, trust Dick Cates' numbers vice everyone else's numbers. Well, right here on this chart that came out of this, sorry for this, I had to work it out and get it blown up. Changes by town and school age, New Hampshire school age population. This is the Monadnock region, takes more than just Cheshire County. And if you look at it, no one in here has gained more than 100, well, except for Hillsborough up here. But basically, these areas, Mount Vernon, Milford, Greenville, Mason, Stoddard, Washington, and Langdon, they've gained between 100 to 1,000, between 0 and 100 students in the 10 years between 2000 to 2010. All this white area has changes between 0 and 2,500 students. Keene has been suffering some tremendous losses, both at the high school and both at the elementary school level. Like I spoke earlier about how we expanded the high school and we had that gap. Like I've said before, that's why I pushed to get the Winchester children in, because that Winchester children, putting 200 children into the Keene High School, not only did it benefit the children from Winchester with a quality education, but it also ensured that people of Keene and our kids and everyone else that came here could get a quality education, because the tuition that we were charging them more than offset the cost of having those students here. And so that was extremely critical. But we're not going to be so lucky in the future. Right here from Kathleen Ronay of the Concord Monitor. Fallen enrollments mean more choices. But here it is, like right here. But dwindling enrollment statewide means high schools are now looking for sources of revenue to avoid painful cuts to teachers and programs. So now those K-8 systems are now looking that it's a buyer's market and we can now maybe have choices. That K-8, not only that, is both the elementary school and at the middle school. And basically right now, we have people on the school board who are spending quite a bit of time going out and trying to convince other school districts to send their children to Keene. And that comes to the question is, if we're going in and looking at the future for our K-5, shouldn't we be looking at K-5 just for the Keene children? And we shouldn't be doing like the jail, building all this extra space, and hopefully that the feds will send us their prisoners. Nah, didn't work. The feds have their own prison, and now we, the taxpayers, are paying for a bunch of empty spaces. I had shown information like I shown here last week, and now it's here again, which I said, well, I was told that my numbers were bogus, and the school district and the SAU would rather put their trust into a certain individual. Births are down statewide, and the number of school-aged children in New Hampshire dropped by more than 15,000 students from 2002 to 2012. As enrollments drops, administrators are forced with making cuts. If districts want to keep teachers and vibrant academic programs, one of the only solutions left is finding more kids to fill those empty seats. Again, so now instead of worrying about the quality of education, we're going to be worrying about how we can get other school districts to come to Keene. Barrington School Board put out a request for proposals in October as it neared the end of its contract with Dover in 2014. In addition to Dover, Somersworth, Cole Brown, Oyster River have shown interest. It goes, Dover School Board chairwoman says, when we first went in, there was a cap because they were worried that we were going to grow so fast they wouldn't be able to take all our students. So they said, we can't take more than this many, but then they didn't grow. Oyster River already offers a lower price than Cole Brown to Barrington students. Cole Brown charges $13,500 per tradition students, so Oyster River sets its price at $13,000. That's less than the $16,000 average per student at the high school, said Oyster River Superintendent James Morris. Explaining that lower price to voters can be difficult, said Morris. So basically, when you go and look at it, Oyster River, if you live in Oyster River and you're a taxpayer, you have to fund your student at $16,000 at your high school. Because Cole Brown offered Barrington students tuition at $13,500, Oyster River turned around and says, hey, we'll take those kids at $13,000. So basically, Oyster River right now, the taxpayers of Oyster River are now subsidizing the Cole Brown, the Barrington students, $3,000 a year. And it goes, explain that lower price to voters can be difficult, Morris said. Oyster River has the teachers and resources to absorb those students without spending more money, he says, meaning that the school essentially gains an extra $800,000. Well, that's what we did with the Winchester kids. We were gaining over $1 million a year with the Winchester kids, and it was costing us very little. So we had... basically, we were making a profit, and for those 4 to 5 years, that was why we had such a big, massive revenue source because of those kids. Offering lower tuition to students from other towns used to be unthinkable, Joyce said. A decade ago, no one would have dared suggest that because everything was pushing up the numbers. The numbers were increasing. We had more kids than we could handle, he said. This normal is changing the relationship. Public school enrollments are unlikely to tick back up anytime soon. So basically, for example, in Keene, we have a high school that has possibly 400 empty seats. We get possibly some empty seats in the middle school. We're going to keep 4 elementary schools and possibly have empty seats. And what we're going to have to do to keep it down is we're going to have to go to all these small towns and start stealing the students away from them. And we're going to have to offer the best deals. Whoever gives the best deals gets the kids. But it can only be for a 3-year contract. Maybe you take them for 3 years and then they disappear, and then what do you do then? The New Hampshire declining birth rate reflects a national trend, said Ken Johnson, senior demographics with the Cosley Institute at the University of New Hampshire. But the state's population is also aging rapidly. The number of 25 to 44-year-old, the prime childbearing years, went down by 57,000 between 2000 and 2010. We had discussed this a couple of months ago when we were going through the numbers. And the state's largest age group is 45 to 54, Johnson says. The recession also froze people in place nationwide in the early 2000s. Migration in New Hampshire, which brought its families, young people, accounted for the larger portion of growth than the natural increases. Basically, most of the kids that came, the growth for children, were people moving into New Hampshire. Instead, the last couple of years, more people have been moving out of New Hampshire, as shown by the number of 57,000 people basically between 25 and 44 have moved out of New Hampshire. These statistics mean that districts will have to face the consequences of fewer students if they don't find new partnerships. Concord High School enrollment, for example, is projected to drop by 7.2% over the next decade. That's if Deerfield's 200 students stay. Dunbarton's incoming students will be a boost to Bow, rapidly declining high school enrollment, down 17% in the past decade. 3 years ago, Bow had to lay off several teachers. Oyster River in Durham is 300 students shy of meeting its 915 student capacity as high school, which was expanded within the past decade. Kind of sounds like Keene High School. Since 2002, the district population has dropped by 11%, and it's projected to drop an additional 19% during the new decade. Numbers were basically right on the projections that Keene High School had in 2001. It is likely that districts will continue to grapple with shrinking enrollment for foreseeable future, meaning tuition students from small districts will remain in high demand. The choice now is either we open up and find more revenue, or we end up cutting major operations within our program. And so that's what's happening. And so when I go in and say, when we're looking at the number of students, the declining enrollment, all this, the University of New Hampshire, the census, the Monadnock Well-Being, this right here, New Hampshire Charitable Trust, public policy, just over and over. There's 6 or 7 of I've shown, have all said the numbers are down, and they're going to continue to go down, and they're going to continue to go down rapidly. And so it doesn't matter. You can't go and say, I want the numbers to go up. And you can't go and wish for something. You got to face reality. You can't create your reality. Well, yeah, you can create your reality, but you know what? The real reality always wins in the end. And now I'm going to get some of the real reality. See if I get this in the right place. Makes it easy for the cameraman. Right here, this is the real reality, the social economic rankings in the Monadnock region. The ones, everybody in green, Westmoreland, Surrey, Harrisville, Hancock, Sharon, Francistown, and Mount Vernon. They're the top notch in the area. Excuse me. And lo and behold, those are all high income areas, and they don't have very many children. And then basically, right here, these colors, Chesterfield, Langdon, Marlow, Stoddard, Windsor, Nelson, Roxbury, Marlborough, Dublin, Peterborough, Temple, Walton, Greenfield. They're basically, they're right in the middle. They're average. They made out all right. The last 10 years have been pretty good for them. If not pretty good, excuse me, it hasn't been a loss. So those areas, like I said, right in here, they've been able to hold their own. These other ones like Antrim, Washington, Ackworth, Walpole, Alstead, Swansea, Jaffrey, Fitzwilliam, Milford. Some of them, they're just about keeping their nose above the water, a little bit below. They're bobbing up and down. Now, the red areas have serious problems and in serious needs of in well-being index. Hinsdale, Winchester, Troy, Greenville, Deering, Bennington, Hillsborough, Leominster, Gilsum, Sullivan, and Keene. And when I went and looked at it, and you find it really shocking that Keene would be in bright red. Of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Of the 45 communities here in the Monadnock region, Keene is ranked the 7th from the bottom. And the two that are without doubt the worst off is Winchester with a -20 score, Hinsdale with a -16, Troy basically a -11, Greenville a -10, Hillsborough a -8.5, Sullivan 7.3, and Keene 6.8. And so when you go and look at the social economic rankings, and that went part of when I went and stated that Keene's poverty level was 15.5, which was higher than the county, higher than the state, and higher than twice as high as the state, almost twice as high as the state, and as high as higher than the national average. That's some of the. That was the thing that was showing. So when you look at the change of student population, that's why it's so extremely important when we come down to pick the schools and how we're going to reorganize the schools. We have to do it right the first time. We cannot afford to go and spend $12 million and then maybe 5, 6 years from now, come back to you, the people, and say, you know what? we only have enough children for 3 schools. And then people are going to say, hey, we can't do anything right now because we don't want the voters to be upset that we did not be completely upfront with them like we were at the high school, like we were at the prior middle school. And I got in trouble, and I was told that I was insulting some of the board members when I said Monday night, it's really important that we don't make the easy decision, we make the right decision. And the right decisions, if you know they're right, they're really easy to make. But a lot of times people won't make the right decisions because they don't want to suffer the consequences of it. Because, you know what, if you make the right decision, people are going to be mad at you. But you know what? Most of them will come around along later on. It's just like when you're kids. Mom and dad are some of the dumbest people in the world until we get to be about 30, 35, and we have some of our kids of our own, and then we soon realize, wow, mom and dad were pretty smart after all. Then we're in our 40s, and we're realizing, hey, I'm saying some of the same things that mom and dad did. I'm doing some of the same things that mom and dad did to me when I was sneaky, or I was doing this, or I was breaking the rules. And so I guess, you know what? They did the right thing, and we were upset at them. But you know what? You know how do we know they were the right thing? Because we're doing it for our children. We realize we want what's best for our children, so that makes us understand that mom and dad were doing what they thought was best for us. And the last chart. All these charts are in the community well-being in the Monadnock region. You can get it from the United Way. There's a bunch of other places you can get it, but just call the United Way and they can get you a copy of it. And this right here is the average wage, a percentage of livable wages by county. This is 207. It's a little bit worse off now, but basically in 2007, before the start of the recession, even when the economy and everything was doing really well, the workers in Cheshire County basically only made 1% more than what was necessary to have a livable wage. When you compare it to like Grafton, 128, Coors, 114, or even the state average of 109. And so basically, that means that people in Keene, and the average wage in Keene meant that people live from paycheck to paycheck. A lot of people live paycheck to paycheck in Keene. And so if it's 101, so there was other people in this area that weren't making it, but this is the average of everybody. And we know that some people in Keene make pretty good money. So basically, again, that's Keene. That's why we have to make sure we don't spend any extra tax money that we don't need. We don't build any buildings or fix up any buildings that we don't need. And we have to make sure that we give a quality education to our children, so they can get out of that. They can get out of living from paycheck to paycheck. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap it up. We're going to have another clip from Ted. It's about the price of living in an era of invulnerability. And this has to do a little bit like with the Boston bombing and some of the other things that go on. It's the price that we pay to live in a perfectly safe world. What does it cost us in our desire to live in a perfectly safe world? And it's about a 16-minute clip, and I think you'll find it really interesting. And this woman hits she hits it out of the ballpark quite a few times. So you might want to watch this a couple of times to get her points across, and you might be able to reflect some of the stuff back on you, and you go, wow, is that a price do I really want to pay? So again, thank you. I hope you enjoyed the clip. And if you have any other questions, if you see me on the road, ask me some questions about the school district or whatever. I'm your school board member. And so again, I'll see you on the long road. And I want to thank Mary, who stopped and talked to me about last week in a little incident at Walmart. I really appreciate her time of talking to me. And so, again, thank you, and see you on the long road. I won't be here next week. I'll be in Oklahoma. Thank you.
So I'm going to start by walking you into a scene in a movie, and then I want y'all to tell me what happens next. Okay, here's my black. Christmas Eve. Beautiful night, light snowfall. Young family of 4 in the car on the way to Grandma's house for dinner. They're listening to the radio station, the one that starts playing the Christmas music like right at Halloween. Jingle Bells comes on, the kids in the back seat go crazy. Everyone breaks into song. The camera pans in on the faces of the kids, the mom, dad. What happens next? Car crash. 60% of people say car crash. 60%. Another 10 to 15% have equally fatalistic answers, but more creative. I have the camera cuts to the oncologist who is looking at the bad news that he's going to share the day after Christmas. They get to grandmother's house, everyone's dead, a serial killer's on the loose. And I had one dude who worked in a shark attack. I did. What's interesting to me about this, and it's an indictment a little bit of the media, which I wouldn't so much care about, except that I'm a vulnerability researcher, and I've spent the last 10 years studying vulnerability, and I cannot tell you how many hundreds and hundreds of stories that I've collected from people who that is their response, not just to media, but in their real lives. How many parents I've interviewed who will say, and I'm looking at my children and they're sleeping and I'm on this, just the verge of bliss, and I picture something horrible happening. Do you know this? Yes. I get the promotion and I get to fly up to headquarters, to find out about my new job and what's going to happen. Plane crashes. The fatalistic response is not universal. We're not all like that. But it is a symptom of an issue that is both universal and, I believe, profoundly dangerous. And that is, we are losing our tolerance for vulnerability. And in our culture, what do we think is synonymous with vulnerability? Weakness. Y'all are an excellent audience. It's almost as if I trained you. It's perfect. Weakness. And I'm going to talk about how that's not the case tonight. Vulnerability is absolutely at the core of fear and anxiety and shame and very difficult emotions that we all experience. But vulnerability is also the birthplace of joy, of love, of belonging, of creativity, of faith. And so it becomes very problematic when, as a culture, we lose our capacity to be vulnerable. So this kind of fatalistic car crash is a symptom. I refer to it as foreboding joy. One of the symptoms that we're losing our capacity for vulnerability is that joy actually becomes foreboding. Something good happens, or we're looking at someone we love, or we're thinking about something we care about, and then we become compelled to beat vulnerability to the punch. Other symptoms: disappointment as a lifestyle. It is much easier to live disappointed than it is to feel disappointment. And so this is the person in the after-school movie that, I don't want to play your stupid game because it's dumb and boring, and because really maybe nobody will ask me. We sidestep getting excited about something because we're not sure it's actually going to happen. Low-grade disconnection is another symptom of vulnerability avoidance. We go through the motions. It's like low-grade fever. It may not kill us, but it keeps us pretty miserable. Perfection is one of the, I call it the 200-pound shield. How can anything go wrong if my life looks like an ad? I'm going to perform and please and make sure everything's perfect. And perfectionism has nothing to do with striving for excellence and healthy, it's nothing to do with healthy striving. People who I interview who are absolutely accomplished and people who strive for excellence are the biggest negotiators and compromisers that I've ever interviewed. Perfection is a tool to protect ourselves. Extremism. There's a very simple equation. Faith minus vulnerability equals extremism. Faith is the vulnerability that flows between the shores of certainty. Faith without vulnerability. Spirituality is inherently vulnerable. It is believing in things we don't understand or really can't see. And last, I believe the most universal way that we are dealing with an intolerance for vulnerability in our culture is that we numb. And I'll talk about this in a minute. Let's go to a bigger question, and that is, what is driving this intolerance for vulnerability in us? And I believe the answer is scarcity. We live in a culture that tells us that there is never enough. That we are not enough, that we are not good enough, that we are not safe enough, that we can never be certain enough, that we're not perfect enough. And maybe the one that we really don't talk about, that I think is perhaps the most dangerous, is that we are not extraordinary enough. In this world, somehow, an ordinary life has become synonymous with a meaningless life. And so often we are missing what is truly important because we're on the quest for what is extraordinary. Not understanding that in our ordinary lives, in the ordinary moments of our lives, is really where we can find the most joy. One of the things that happens, I think, in our culture of scarcity is that we are constantly collecting images and messages and experiences. I think it's unconscious. I really don't think that we're aware of how many messages and images of scarcity that we collect every day. And I want to tell a story about something that happened about 6 months ago that I think really illustrates this. So I have to catch a flight to go do a talk somewhere, and my daughter's, I have a 5-year-old and an 11-year-old, and my daughter's really struggling with a school project. I am definitely in the scarcity mode. I shouldn't be going. I'm not a good enough mom. I can't balance all of this. I have to go to my bank, which is inside of a grocery store, which is, I don't know if that happens here, but in Texas, all the banks have moved inside the grocery stores. So I walk up to the grocery store, the sliding glass doors, and there's a big Code Adam sticker, which if you don't know what that is, it's an incredibly important program, but it's a program that says this store and its employees are trained that when a child has gone missing or nabbed, everything in the store shuts down. So I look at that and I think, oh God, okay, just stay focused, Brene. No one's going to nab your kids while you're away. I go and get my money, I get back in the car, I get on the freeway toward the airport, and I pass the Amber Alert. Keep driving, Brene, keep driving. About 2 miles past the Amber Alert, there's a sign that tells me that 39 people have been killed on that specific stretch of highway. And please wear my seatbelt. Then I get to the airport, and of course, I'm in line to security, getting naked, and I hear, the threat code has been moved to orange. And then I go through this thing that I'm like, oh my God, holy crap, is that a movement? Is it always orange? I was like, I'm gonna start writing it on my hand on a Sharpie, like, it's always orange. Okay, orange is not, hasn't gone bad. I'm like, what is it? Okay, so I'm like, orange. Okay, it's orange. I think it was orange yesterday. Maybe something's happened, and I was busy reading the Amber Alert, then trying to find the license plate. So I get to my gate and I sit down and they're like, do not leave unintended baggage, And I look down and there's a bag. And I'm like, oh my God, wait, it's a diaper bag. And I know that mother is like 10 feet away chasing her kid and I'm like, but I saw this on Law and Order. And I'm gonna board that plane and then the next thing you're gonna hear is ching ching, that Law and Order ching, ching ching. And then we're blow up. So I get on the plane, and I'm really getting ready to start. I'm in kind of what you would call, I would say, an anxiety attack. So I'm having an anxiety attack, and the guy comes in. I'm flying in business class, and the guy comes in. He's sitting next to me. He turned out to be a supply chain manager consultant. And so he looks over, and he's like, "You okay?" I'm like, "I'm good. Yeah, what's up?" And my phone rings, and my son's face pops up. Well, he's 5, so that means his school's calling. Hello, Charlie's got a fever. Can you come get him? So I'm like, I text my husband, I take care of it. And the guy next to me said, really, are you okay? By this time, the cabin doors are closed. And I said, you know what, I'm good. But I'm having that thing where I can't decide whether my gut is really saying, get off the flight, something's gonna happen, or I'm just freaking out. And I'm trying to figure out how to do something crazy enough to get off the flight, but to not end up on the no-fly list. And so, I'm a super blast to fly with. So then he said, let me get you a drink. And I said, I don't drink. And he goes, Xanax? And I was like, no, I don't do Xanax either. Which is a shame, but I don't. But then what I realized is it really makes me think about my work. Because we numb vulnerability. Now, had he said chips and queso, that would have been a completely different issue. Evidence of the numbing. We are the most addicted. We are the most medicated, obese, and in debt adult cohort in human history. We're numbing. And this doesn't even include busyness. I didn't even put the busy slide up. When they start having busy recovery meetings, they'll have to, busy 12-step meetings, they'll have to rent out football stadiums. Because we just stay so busy that the truth of our lives can't catch up. That's the plan. And so what are the consequences of numbing vulnerability? What are the consequences of trying to beat vulnerability to the punch? Here's the consequence to numbing that I've learned. And as a vulnerability researcher, I've spent the first 6 years of my research studying shame, empathy, and courage, and the last 4 years studying joy, authenticity, love, and belonging. And one of the things that I learned that was very startling for me personally and everyone I've ever met is that you cannot selectively numb emotion. When we numb the dark emotion, when we numb vulnerability and fear and shame of not being good enough, we by default numb joy. We cannot selectively just numb the dark emotions. We have interesting research around this. We have research that shows us in addiction studies that an intensely positive experience is as likely to trigger relapse as an intensely negative experience. Let me tell you, if vulnerability is a sharp edge, there may be nothing sharper than joy. To let yourself soften into loving someone, to caring about something passionately, that's vulnerable. So the question becomes, how do we embrace vulnerability? And here's what I learned from the research. We practice gratitude. We stop and be thankful for what we have. I've interviewed a lot of people who have been through many horrific things, from genocide to trauma. And when you ask them what they need, they will tell you, I don't need your pity, I don't need your sympathy. When you look at your children, I need to know you're grateful. I need to know that you know what you have. So to practice gratitude, to honor what's ordinary about our lives, because that is what's truly extraordinary. We can compete with the images from the media, from the news, from the scary shows on TV. with our own images of gratitude about what's ordinary in our lives, the people we love, our kids, our family, play, our community, and nature. These are things that happen every single day that we're so busy being afraid we're missing these. So that's, I think, the biggest thing, is to be grateful for what we have, to honor what's ordinary. And last, I just want to say that, and I'm a parent and I'm a vulnerable person too, but I really believe, we want more guarantees. We want to believe we're not going to get hurt and that bad things are not going to happen, and they are. But there is a guarantee that no one talks about that, and that is that if we don't allow ourselves to experience joy and love, we will definitely miss out on filling our reservoir with what we need when those hard things happen. And so I'll end on the note that I'm grateful for your time tonight, and I'm grateful to be here. And I hope this is something that we can do together, because I believe in vulnerability we'll find what really gives purpose and meaning to our lives.